Hello students, in this module we will continue with the chapter Mughal Sultanate under the Delhi Sultanate, Mughal Empire. And in the previous module we have done about the sources of information as well as about the two main rulers Babur and Akbar. In this particular module we will be doing about the policies of Akbar and then coming to the last king, that is the last impressive king, and that was Aurangzeb. So here in this module we will be doing Akbar's Rajput policy under the Mughal dynasty and how it ended the animosity between the Mughals as well as the Rajputs. Next we see the social and educational reforms that Akbar introduced in his kingdom. Besides that, we see about Aurangzeb and the administrative system of the Mughals during the reign of the later Mughals. Also, we will talk about the Mansabdari system and the land revenue system. So we will begin with Aurangzeb's policy regarding Rajput and the other social reforms. First of all, we see it was Akbar who got into the matrimonial alliances with the Rajputs, and this was one of the best way of getting into friendly relations with the Rajputs, because since old age, since ancient time, it was the enmity between the two dynasties. But this particular step of Akbar marked the end of that animosity. It was Bharmal's daughter, the Raja of Amber. His daughter was married to Akbar, and that was Harkabai. But besides being Hindu princess, she was never forced to follow Islam or follow the religion of Akbar. Rather, all the people, all the wives of Akbar, they were given religious freedom. They were even given proper position in their relatives, and people of their culture, religion, were given proper positions and offices in the court. So that is how, when Akbar started, you can say, respecting them, people always felt that this was particularly the king who wanted to have religious tolerance and accepted anyone and everyone despite of their religious faiths. So that is how the Rajput policy of Akbar ended the age-old animosity between the two dynasties, and the Rajputs were made equal partners in most of the Mughal government and Mughal policies. Besides that, it considerably affected the public policies of the Mughals and greatly helped in forming a proper composite culture. So that is how the Rajput policy of Akbar helped not only the kingdom, but as per the royal people, but even the general public was also benefited by this particular policy. Next we see the steps that he took for the integration of the people in his kingdom. Now the policies or the steps that he took first of all included the abolition of poll tax or jizya tax, which the non-Muslims had to give when they usually go for the pilgrim. Even the pilgrim tax, which was basically a tax for taking a holy bathe in the religious places, especially by the Hindus, was supposed to be given. So that was also abolished by Akbar. And even during the time before Akbar, many of the prisoners of war, they were forced to convert to Islam. Even that was stopped. So all these policies, all these steps made Akbar a universal king, a king for all religion or people from all different faiths. Besides that, he strengthened the liberal principles. To strengthen the liberal principles, Akbar also enrolled many of the Hindu people, Hindu officers to his court, and that too at high nobilities. Besides that, in 1575, Akbar built a particular Ibadat Khana, a prayer hall, and that was at Fatehpur Sikri. At this hall, he used to call selected theologians of all the different religion, and they used to have their prayers, studies, discussions, and all about the God, and their theological literature was discussed there. Akbar issued a declaration or mazhar, and that was something which made Akbar or the emperor the highest authority in the terms of religion also. That means removing the ulamas, but rather taking the charge by the emperor. So he became the whole sole person to be discussing the religious things, obviously, in the world. And then next is Akbar promulgated a new faith called Din-e-Ilahi. This was a new religious religion that he tried to start, and that was belonging to that belongingness of God, or talking to God as one. All the religions were considered as different ways leading to one and the same God, and therefore it was The new religion stressed on virtues like courage, loyalty and justice. It also demanded loyalty to the emperor also, because emperor was considered to be one of the person selected and sent representative of God himself. Besides that, the basic purpose of forming Din-e-Ilahi was Sulh-e-Kul. Sulh-e-Kul is basically universal harmony. You might be asked in short questions, what is Sulh-e-Kul? So Sulh-e-Kul is basically universal brotherhood, universal harmony. Akbar set up big translation departments also for translating many different literary works, so that knowledge could be exchanged from one place to another, from one language to another, so that more and more people should be able to understand the literary works, the real, you can say, rich literature of different languages, and language should not be a barrier, should not be an obstacle in imparting and exchanging the knowledge and literature. So that is why he made many of the works changed from their original language to various common languages, or even languages which were spoken in the distinct places. Then we see the social and the educational reforms which Akbar took into consideration. And first of all, it was, he issued orders to the kotwals that all the women, those who are forcibly asked to do sati or perform sati, they should be stopped. Any woman who was doing it on her own free will was allowed to do it, but besides that, nobody was supposed to force any women for a sati pratha. Besides that, he legalized widow remarriage. That means widows were given this opportunity that they can once again re-establish their lives and household. Besides that, Akbar was against having anyone more than one wife, but he made it a condition that anyone can have more than one wife only on the condition that the first wife could not bear the children. Then only a person could have another marriage. Besides that, he also raised the age for the marriage. For the girls, it was raised to 14, and for the boys, it was raised to 16. You might think it is still young, but at that time, the child marriage was quite prevalent. So raising an age to 14 and 16 was quite considerable. Besides that, Akbar revised the educational syllabus. That means he laid stress that more of moral education, mathematics, and secular subjects like agriculture, geometry, and all these astronomy, logic, history, these should be taught to a child. And that is why he laid stress on the education, in which a child gets a proper knowledge of the world around him. Not only this, even after that, many other Mughal emperors also laid various certain provisions in which they laid stress on education. Like one of the duties was also given out of Public Works Department, and that was Shureh-Am. Shureh-Am is basically building of schools and colleges, so that more centers of education could be started to give knowledge to everyone around them, around in the city, in the kingdom. Besides that, Jahangir passed a particular law that if a rich man in his kingdom died without a legal heir, then all the property, all his assets would be given in such a way that they are used for production or for construction of more schools, colleges, and educational institutions, so that children could get education, or otherwise they can be used as scholarship for the children, those who could not assist. Female education was also very prevalent over there, although it was not widely prevalent, but you can say most of the rich women, rich girls, they could have the public tutor coming to their house and teaching them, and girls from the middle class, they usually had to attend the same school as with the boys, although if they don't have any restrictions from the family. So that is how women education was given a chance. It totally depended on the outlook of the families, not a social barrier. Then we move on to the another king, and that was Aurangzeb. Now here we don't say that Aurangzeb was directly the son of Akbar, but later kings, it was Aurangzeb who came, and he had a very long rule of 50 years. Yet in these 50 years, he is basically a warrior king. Not that he did a lot of expeditions, but he was always, you can say, suppressing the rebellions and wanted to conquer more and more kingdom. That is why he just had one plan to conquer the entire India and bring it under his control. And for that, he wanted to have those unexplored areas brought under Mughal Empire. So he almost, when the empire was at its peak, his role was at its highest peak. At that time, Mughal Empire had almost the entire India under their control. It belonged from Kashmir to almost to the region of Kaveri River, and from Kabul or Kandahar in Afghanistan, almost to the Chittagaon region in east, that is now Bangladesh. So here he had a policy which was totally opposite of Akbar, and that was of religious intolerance. And he also used later years of his reign just controlling and managing the rebellions, controlling the vast empire so that nothing is lost from the empire. Under Aurangzeb, Mughal Empire reached its largest extent, but also witnessed a series of political disturbances also, because this was the time when they were lacking a lot of royal treasury, because everything was almost over during the time of Shah Jahan. So Aurangzeb had to do a lot of work for this particular thing to generate revenues and everything. He had to be really cruel and harsh towards his people. He left behind an empire which was on the verge of collapse because of the shortage of money, revenue, royal treasury depleting. So all these reasons were good enough to make this empire fall down into smaller pieces. But till the time Aurangzeb was there, he was a good leader and he could manage and control the entire kingdom under one rule. But as he died, the kingdom was about to break down, and we do see that later in the years of history it did break into various other smaller pieces, and since then Mughal Empire was never able to rise up to its glory, and later onwards obviously it was all taken over by British. Here we see about the administrative system of the Mughals. Now when we are talking about the administrative system of the Mughals, I have told you about Mansabdari system and the land revenue system, but we do have a few more points that I'll read out for you. First is, there are a number of references in the court chronicles of the Mughals which show that the power of the Mughal kings came directly from God. This was basically the idea given, that king is a representative of God, and so most of his powers and ideas are basically from the God. According to Abul Fazl, the office of a true ruler was very responsible one, which depended on divine illumination. So everything has to be taken care very carefully and under the sight of the God. So everything has to be done properly. So this can be done only once a particular king is illuminated or enlightened by the knowledge of God himself. So that is why it was considered to be a very sacred place. The emperor was the head of the executive, legislature, judiciary and the army. In totality, you can say he was a king over all the other spheres of the life and society. He was the supreme commander of the armed forces, and all other commanders were appointed and removed only by the king himself. The royal uzuk, which is a small single ring, a particular ring worn in the hands, was affixed to farmans granting appointments, titles, jagirs. So this was like a royal seal. Whatever was the print of the that particular ring, that was impressioned on the farmans, and then it was considered that this is a royal edict or a royal order which has been given and signed directly by the king. Nobody could use his ring without the king's assent. Next is ministers. In the days, we are not talking about only Akbar and Aurangzeb, even during the reign between them, all the other rulers, Mughals, we are talking about their kingdom also. So during the days of Babur and Humayun, there used to be prime ministers who were known as the Wakils, who was entrusted with large powers, and that was all in the matters of civil as well as military. During the early years of Akbar's reign, Bairam Khan was the Wakil. Remember, Bairam Khan was the one who was his tutor also, caretaker also. However, after Bairam Khan's death, the office of Wakil was stripped of all its power, and it became more or less just honorary. So entire thing was taken over by the king himself. So this post of prime minister was just an honorary post which was given to some or the other respected person in the court. The head of the revenue department was the wazir, and known as Diwan or Diwane-Ala. So he was the one who used to look after all the departments of revenue. And the military department was headed by a person whose post which was called Mir Bakshi. So you might be asked, who were the officers or ministers who looked after the revenue department or the military department? You should know Diwan or Diwane-Ala for the revenue and Mir Bakshi for the military. Next we move on to the judiciary. The judicial department was headed by Qazi. The post was sometimes combined with that of Chief Sadr also, who used to look after the day-to-day matters of civil administration also. Then next is provincial government. Akbar paid great attention to the provincial government and all this organization of this government. The empire was divided into 12 provinces, which were also known as the Subas. And They were further divided into sarkars, and these sarkars into the mandals, or into the mahals or parganas. Each suba was headed by a governor who was called as you can remember with the name itself, suba was headed by subedar or subhadar or sipahsalar, or even at times it was called as nazim, not nizam but nazim. He was usually a mansabdar of a very high rank. The provincial diwan was in charge of revenue administration of that particular province only. So that means even the provinces had their diwans or diwane-alas. And besides that, the other important officials in the province were Faujdar, Kotwal, Bakshi, like your Mir Bakshi, they were Bakshis, and Sadar Qazi. Sadar Qazi was just like a Qazi doing the work of the chief Sadar also, and along with that a Mutasib. So the center appointed all these officials to the provinces, sarkars and parganas. Hence these divisions were directly responsible to the center. That means whatever the duties or whatever the office they had to maintain, they had to give the direct report to the ruler himself, because they were appointed by the center, by the ruler, to all these provinces. So that is how the maintenance of administration was done in the provinces, and that too was done by the king himself. Now we move on to the main part, and that is the Mansabdari system. Under the Mansabdari system, I will read it clearly for you. The Mansabdari system was a particular unique system which was introduced by Akbar, and under this system every officer was assigned a particular rank. This rank was known as the Mansab of that particular official. Thus the term Mansabdar refers to an individual who was holding a particular Mansab or a rank. So Mansabdar formed the ruling group in the Mughal Empire, and almost the whole nobility, the bureaucracy as well as the military hierarchy had Mansabs. In each department there were Mansabs, ranks given to all the people, those who were in that particular department, whether it's military or whether it's other nobility. The lowest rank in the system was 10 and the highest was 5,000 for nobles. Now what is this 10 and what is this 5,000 that we'll do? It was a grading system used by the Mughals for the rank, salary and even the military responsibility. The ranks were divided into two, namely Zat and Savar. Zat fixed the personal status of the person, so that whichever rank, whichever particular status he belongs to, that was Zat. And the salary was also according to them. For the higher for the Zat, the more prestigious was the noble position in court. The Savar rank indicated the number of cavalryman or Savar. The Savar is basically not Savar, it is a Hindi word Savar. So Savar was basically a Mansabdar who was required to maintain a particular army of number of people. So they had their horsemen, they had their horses from 10 to 5,000, any particular thing. So a big particular Mansabdar might have somewhere around 5,000 men and horses under him, and so on. So accordingly it was all decided over there. So they were supposed to even pay all the money to these people, those who were under them, and even the upkeep of the horses and everything. How would they do it? They could not do it by just their own salaries. Even for their own salaries, for their officials, for people under them, they were given a particular piece of land, and this was called as jagirs. Now these jagirs, lands could be given out for farming, rented farming and everything. So whatever the produce of the farming or the land was, of the jagir was in cash, that was taken as the salary for the Mansabdar. All the people under him, all the horses upkeep, every soldier, cavalryman, everyone, that they were all paid through that particular jagir. So they only had rights to the revenue of their assignments, which was collected from them by their servants, and through that it was distributed to all the different people. Jahangir maintained the Mansabdari system developed by Akbar, but he reduced the average rate of Zat salary from 240 per annum to rupees 200 per annum. Now you might say it's a very small amount, but 240 or 250 at that time meant a huge amount of money, because we are talking about somewhere around 500-600 years ago. Shah Jahan reduced the number of Sawars a noble was required to maintain. Thus a noble was expected to maintain a quota of only 1/3 of his Sawar ranks, and in some cases 1/4. During the reign of Aurangzeb, there was a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars. These and other factors created a shortage of number of jagirs, because when the Mansabdars increased, they had to be given all the jagirs and there was shortage of land. So that is why Mansabdari system turned out to be a little problematic for Aurangzeb. although he did maintain it properly. But here we come to the next part. When we are talking about land, it is very important we talk about the land revenue system. So a uniform system of measurement was established for calculating the land tax. So the revenue had to be collected. How that would be collected? By the measurement of the land. And this was done by Todormal, who drew up schemes for effective tax collection. This was also known as the Todormal Bandobast. The system enriched the state treasury a lot, and the state also gave loans to the poor farmers if their crops failed or the conditions turned out to be unfavorable. So in those ways they were also helped by the royal treasury. This ushered in progress in agriculture, trade and industry, and as a result everything turned out to be progressive and good till the time the royal treasury was not affected by excessive use of Shah Jahan's building and Aurangzeb's expeditions and various other reasons which did affect the royal treasury. And to maintain that, the taxes, the revenues were all increased later onwards, which ultimately turned out to be a particular reason for the downfall of the Mughal Empire also. But that is for the next stories or next chapters. Here we will come to the end of this chapter with this particular topic. So that finishes your topic. And with this, we come to the end of the module. Thank you.